Days after my wife's death, I gave my sandwich to a homeless man. Then he pressed a phone number into my hand and whispered, "Time for revenge. Your father-in-law will pay nothing could prepare me." Can you imagine losing everything? Your job, your future, even the love of your life, all because you dared to fall for the wrong person? Because you stood up to a family consumed by greed and power? I thought I'd lost it all, staring down into an abyss of despair, clutching my newborn son while the very people who destroyed my world called him a stain of filthy bloodline. But then, a quiet stranger in a park handed me a crumpled piece of paper with a phone number, whispering, "Call me when you truly need a way out." And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a way out. This was my shot at brutal, undeniable justice. My name is Darren Banner, and this is the story of how I brought down an empire. To understand why I, a guy from the dirt-poor streets of the Bronx, ended up with a mysterious old man promising to help me dismantle one of New York's most powerful dynasties, we have to go back. Way back. My childhood in the Bronx wasn't glamorous. Our tiny house, squeezed onto a narrow street, always smelled of machine oil from my dad, Tom, a handyman whose calloused hands could fix anything. My mom, Dorothy, worked 2 jobs, teaching part-time by day, slinging hash in a greasy diner by night, just to keep our heads above water. Rain meant buckets in our leaky living room, but my parents filled our cramped home with love, with my dad's stories and my mom's soft songs. They didn't have much, but they had me, and I had them. That was all we needed. But the world outside our little haven was harsh. I remember being 8, watching my dad fix plumbing in a fancy mansion. The owner, a man in a glossy suit, looked at my father like he was dirt, berating him for being slow despite hours of back-breaking work. My tiny fists clenched, blood rushing to my face. My dad, ever the quiet man, just bowed his head and kept working. But as we left, he squeezed my hand and said, "Darren, as long as you're honest and work hard, being poor is not a shame. Don't let them make you feel inferior." Those words seared into my soul. My mom echoed them, her tired eyes still shining after a night shift. "Education is the key, my dear boy. Study hard, and you'll change our lives." I soaked it all in. I vowed my parents would never bow their heads to anyone again. I buried myself in books. I was the kid with patched-up hand-me-downs and worn-out shoes, but I was always at the top of my class. I didn't care about the rich kids' taunts. Every night, under a dim lamp, I studied, my mom by my side, beaming with pride. My dad would bring home discarded books from his clients, telling me, "Knowledge is something no one can take from you." But life reminded me it wasn't just dreams. When I was 13, my mom fell terribly ill. Our meager savings vanished on her medicine. My dad worked day and night, but it wasn't enough. Desperate, I snuck to a grocery store, begging for a job. The owner just sneered, "A poor kid like you? What do you think you can do?" I walked away, head bowed, but that night, hugging my mom, I made another vow. No one would ever look down on my family again. I would work, I would study, and one day, I'd make them see us differently. My escape began with a scholarship to a prestigious high school, then to a top university. It was a foreign world of private cars and European vacations, but I refused to falter. The day I graduated with a finance degree, my mom sobbed, my dad squeezed my hand, saying, "You are our greatest pride." The job market, though, was a brutal wake-up call. Rejection after rejection. One recruiter looked me up and down, scrutinizing my borrowed dress shirt. "Where are you from?" he asked, a sneer in his voice. "The Bronx," I replied, trying to keep steady. He smiled faintly. "We'll be in touch." They never called. Then, a miracle. Sterling Group, a massive financial conglomerate, hired me. My heart hammered as I stepped into their Manhattan skyscraper, surrounded by gleaming glass and polished marble. I felt small, an outsider among expensive suits. But I summoned every ounce of courage, answered every question, and I got the job. My starting salary wasn't much, but for a kid from the Bronx, it was everything. I worked like a machine. Early mornings, late nights, checking every number, analyzing every report. I needed to prove myself, prove my roots didn't define me. Gradually, colleagues noticed the hardworking kid. Some even asked me to review their reports. I was proud, but the class prejudice was undeniable. Ivy League grads, kids from wealthy families, they were treated differently. While they lunched at upscale restaurants, talking about the Hamptons and family yachts, I ate my mom's homemade sandwich in the break room, trying to ignore the whispers. One day, a colleague, Mark, smirked, "From the Bronx, huh? How'd you even get in here?" "Must be luck." I smiled, swallowed my anger. I knew I couldn't let emotions win. Still, the job changed my life. I rented a small apartment, sent money home. The first time I brought a new TV to our little house, my mom's eyes lit up, even as she playfully scolded me. My dad just patted my shoulder, his eyes brimming with pride. I paid for my mom's medicine, fixed the roof. Seeing them smile more often, finally free from constant worry, made every condescending glance, every exhausting day worth it. I started climbing the ranks. My boss, Mr. Harris, a stern but fair man, saw something in me. "Darren, you've got what it takes. Don't let anyone hold you back." His words were like adrenaline. I worked harder, became a key player. Colleagues stopped calling me the kid from the Bronx. But not everyone. Roy and Bill Sterling, the chairman's sons, were a constant reminder of the divide. Roy, arrogant and condescending. Bill, lazy and riding on his family name. They looked at me like I was a cockroach in their penthouse. Once, in a meeting, Roy deliberately asked, "Darren, I heard you grew up in the slums, right? How does someone like you end up at Sterling Group?" The room went silent. I met his gaze, calm. "I got here through ability, Mr. Roy. How about you?" A few chuckles. Roy didn't laugh. I knew I was a thorn in his side. Then everything changed. At the company's 50th anniversary gala, I saw Ava Sterling, the chairman's only daughter. She stood out in a simple green dress, a beacon of light among the superficial smiles. I, holding an orange juice in a corner, was an outsider. But when her eyes met mine, a strange warmth bloomed. She walked over, her smile gentle, without a trace of arrogance. "You're Darren, right?" she asked, her voice clear as a bell. I nodded, flustered. We talked. She asked about my work, about finance, and listened with a sincerity that shocked me. She wasn't like the rest of her family. No arrogance, no laziness. She was intelligent, sharp, and full of emotion, as if she understood struggles I never spoke aloud. Our conversation stretched. I'd smiled more in those few hours than in the past month. We started running into each other, then meeting for coffee. She spoke of escaping her family's gilded cage, and I, of my parents and our cramped house. I saw her, a free spirit yearning for authenticity. Love came. Like a breeze, gentle yet powerful. I don't know the exact moment I fell for her, but maybe it was when she grabbed my hand during a sudden downpour, laughing, her hair soaked, saying, "Darren, I love moments like this. No need to pretend, just being ourselves." In that instant, my heart was hers. But I also knew this love would be brutally hard. She was Gregory Sterling's daughter. I was a guy from the slums. Rumors spread like wildfire. The whispers grew louder. Roy and Bill didn't hide their contempt. Roy cornered me, his voice icy. "Who do you think you are, Darren? A slum kid dreaming of my sister? Don't make me teach you your place." My fists clenched, a storm brewing inside. Then, my worst fear. Ava called me to a park, her eyes red but resolute. "Father knows about us," she trembled. "He said if I don't end things, he'll fire you. And cut off all my money." My blood ran cold. Gregory Sterling was a man who used power like a weapon. But Ava gripped my hand. "I'm not afraid. I don't care what they do. I love you and I want to be with you." Her words melted my heart, but also filled me with terror. I didn't want her to lose everything. I'd seen my parents' lifetime of poverty. But she held my hand tighter. "We'll get through this together, Darren. I believe in you." I knew I couldn't turn back. I loved Ava, and I would fight for her, even if it meant facing the world. We decided to marry. When I proposed, she hugged me, tears streaming, but a radiant smile. "Having you is enough," she said. But for the Sterlings? It was an outrage. Gregory summoned me to his opulent office. "You think you're worthy of my daughter, Darren?" he asked, his voice low, commanding. "You don't belong in this world. If you persist, I'll make sure you lose everything. Your job, your reputation, everything." I stood tall, meeting his icy gaze. "Sir, I love Ava, and I won't let anyone take her from me." 2 months later, we married in a small, simple church. Only a few close friends, my parents, my relatives. My mom, in a modest dress, hugged Ava. "You're the pride of our family. Take care of my boy, okay?" Ava burst into tears, embracing her tightly. My dad patted my shoulder, his eyes full of pride, tinged with worry. Not a single Sterling showed up. They saw our marriage as a stain. We moved into a small apartment in the suburbs, our home. Every night, with Ava in my arms, I felt like the happiest man alive. But deep down, I knew the storm wasn't over. Gregory Sterling wasn't one to let things go easily. The storm hit weeks later. Mr. Harris called me into his office, his eyes heavy. Darren, he said, you're fired. It's an order from above. I tried to intervene, but no one goes against Gregory Sterling. The floor beneath me crumbled. I expected it, but the job I'd poured my soul into ripped away, still cut like a knife. I went home, trying to appear calm, but Ava always knew. She sat on the sofa, her eyes bright with concern. Darren, what's wrong? I pulled her into my arms, told her everything. She gripped my hand. We'll get through this. They can take your job, but not our love. But the Sterlings weren't done. Soon after, Ava received a letter from her father. All her financial support, bank accounts, credit cards, even her inheritance, gone. You chose a filthy pauper, the letter read, its tone cold as a blade. You will pay for your foolishness. Ava's hands trembled, then she tore it to pieces. They're not my family, she said, tears streaming. You and your parents are my real family. I held her, trying to hide the fear gnawing at my heart. I threw myself into finding a new job, but doors slammed shut. Darren, you have a strong resume, one recruiter bluntly said. But no one dares hire you. You've crossed the Sterlings. They have more power than you realize. Gregory had blacklisted me. We survived on Ava's meager savings and small loans from my parents. Our future grew dimmer by the day. Then, a spark of joy, unexpected and profound. Ava was pregnant. When she told me in our tiny kitchen, the world lit up. I knelt, hugged her, tears rolling down my cheeks. We're having a baby, I whispered, choked with emotion. She smiled, placing my hand on her belly. A boy, she said, her eyes sparkling. Tony, after my grandfather. The only one in my family who truly loved me. I nodded, feeling a surge of new strength. But joy was fleeting. In her 8th month, Ava weakened, fainting often. At the hospital, doctors grimly spoke of a rare, dangerous complication. We'll do everything we can, they said, but their eyes held unease. I held Ava's hand, a storm raging inside. I couldn't lose her. The day Ava went into labor, I stayed by her side, gripping her hand, praying. Then the doctor pulled me aside, his voice trembling. Darren, Ava's condition is critical. We may only be able to save the mother or the child. The world collapsed. Save Ava, I shouted, desperation clawing at me. Save my wife, please. I rushed back to her. Ava lay pale, breathing faintly. She seemed to sense it. Struggling to open her eyes, her trembling hand reached for mine. Darren, she whispered, you have to save our baby. Promise me you'll protect Tony. I shook my head, tears falling like rain, unable to accept losing her. But Ava squeezed my hand, her voice weak but resolute. Let me do this for our child. You have to be strong for Tony. I collapsed beside her, sobbing like a child. Every second was a death sentence. Then a decision. Tony was born, a tiny, healthy boy with clear eyes, just like his mother's. But Ava, the woman I loved more than life itself, was gone. Forever. I sat motionless, holding Tony, my heart shattered. She had sacrificed everything for our son, and I, helpless, could do nothing to save her. Ava's funeral was on a rainy day. I stood by her coffin, barely holding myself together. My parents were there, my mom cradling Tony, weeping. And then the Sterlings arrived. Not to mourn. Roy approached, his eyes full of contempt. This is the result of your stupidity, Darren. That child is a stain of filthy bloodline. Bill smirked nearby. Even Gregory, with his icy demeanor, looked at my parents and said, your family is a disgrace, raising a son who dared to taint the Sterling bloodline. My dad bowed his head, holding my mom's hand, trying to stay calm. My mom clutched Tony tighter, shielding him from those venomous words. I stood there, blood boiling, powerless. But deep within me, a fire ignited. Not hatred, but an unshakable determination. I swore I wouldn't let the Sterlings trample on the people I loved. I would protect Tony. I would make them pay for what they did to Ava, to me, to our family. After the funeral, I brought Tony back to my parents' small house. The apartment Ava and I called home was a painful memory I couldn't afford to keep. My parents welcomed us with silent hugs and sorrowful eyes. My mom cradled Tony, singing to him. My dad quietly fixed up my old crib, the one he'd made for me 30 years ago. Stay here, Darren, he said. Family is for leaning on each other. But I knew I couldn't rely on them forever. They were aging, their health failing, their meager savings barely enough. I had to stand up. I began the job search again, knowing the Sterlings had blacklisted me from any decent job in New York. So I took odd jobs, delivering packages, waiting tables, night security at a supermarket. Every day, I left before sunrise and returned when Tony was asleep in my mom's arms. The little money I earned was just enough for formula and bills. Some nights, watching Tony sleep, I felt an indescribable pain. He had Ava's bright, gentle eyes. Every time I looked at him, it was Ava reminding me, be strong for Tony. My life became an endless cycle of exhaustion and disappointment. 16-hour days, never enough. My mom coughed more. My dad, despite trying to hide it, suffered from back pain. Money vanished into medicine, diapers, bills. Once, I had to sell Ava's watch, a gift she'd bought with her last savings before her family cut her off. Handing it over felt like selling a piece of my heart. But I had no choice. Tony needed to eat. My parents needed to live. In my weakest moments, I questioned everything. Had I done the right thing? I'd fought for love, defied prejudice, but the cost was Ava's life. And now I was dragging my family into the storm. Some nights, when Tony cried for milk I couldn't immediately afford, I buried my head in my hands, feeling utterly helpless. I missed Ava, her smile, the way she said we'd overcome everything. Now she was gone, and I was left with Tony, an innocent child entirely dependent on me. I longed to give him a better life, to let my parents rest. But I didn't know where to begin. I barely recognized myself in the mirror. Dark circles, disheveled hair, gaunt face. Was this still the Darren Ava loved? The man who swore to change his family's life? But amid the darkness, a faint spark flickered. My mother's tired but warm smile as she held Tony. My father, despite his pain, telling me old stories. And Tony, grasping my finger, smiling purely, like Ava. These moments reminded me of my parents' teachings, integrity, resilience. Those are things no one can take from you. I couldn't give up. I started seeking small opportunities, anything to get back on my feet. Extra night shifts, free online courses to refresh my finance knowledge. I didn't know how I'd confront the Sterling family, but I knew I couldn't let them win. The vow I made at Ava's funeral still burned. And then, one fateful evening, destiny knocked. That dreary afternoon in the park, I'd bought a sandwich in haste. Seeing a frail, homeless old man, I tore it in half and offered him a piece. He accepted, his trembling hands contrasting with startlingly sharp eyes that seemed to see through my soul. Then, silently, he pulled out a piece of paper with a handwritten phone number. "Call me," he said, his voice low and enigmatic, "when you truly need a way out." I tucked it into my pocket, thinking it an odd gesture of gratitude. But returning home, exhausted, his words haunted me. A way out. Something I craved more than anything. That night, in my parents' small kitchen, the dim yellow light casting shadows on the crumpled paper, I thought of Tony, sleeping soundly. My parents, trying to sleep, my mom stirring to check on Tony, my dad hiding his back pain while fixing our leaky roof. I couldn't let them live like this. Couldn't let Tony grow up in the same poverty. I picked up the phone, my fingers hesitating, then dialed. My heart pounded. The phone rang, then a calm, deep voice answered. "I've been waiting for your call." I took a deep breath. "I'm Darren. We met at the park. You told me to call when I needed a way out." The old man chuckled softly. "Meet me tomorrow at the cafe on 5th Street, 10 a.m., don't be late." He hung up, leaving me with a flood of questions, a chilling sense that I'd just stepped into a game whose rules I didn't know. The next morning, the cafe was old, worn, nearly empty. The old man was already there, tucked in a corner, a woolen cap pulled low. But his eyes, sharp and resolute, held my gaze. I sat down, feeling I was entering a dangerous chess match. "Thank you for coming, Darren," he said, sliding a glass of water toward me. "I know you're at rock bottom. But I also know you're the only one who can do what I couldn't." My heart raced. "Who are you and why me?" He smiled, a sad smile heavy with memories. Slowly, he removed his cap, revealing a weathered face etched with deep wrinkles. "I am Arthur Sterling," he said, his voice steady but laden with emotion. "The founder of Sterling Group. And Ava's grandfather." The air left the room. Arthur Sterling. A name from distant company lore, a forgotten legend. Ava had spoken of him, the only one in her family who loved her unconditionally. "My grandfather was the best person I ever knew," she'd said. "But my father pushed him out. I never imagined I'd meet him." Arthur began his story. He built Sterling Group from nothing, but his son and daughter-in-law betrayed him. Tricked him into signing over shares, slandered him, forced him out. I lost everything, Darren, he said, his gaze distant. The company, my honor, my family. But I never stopped watching. I knew about you. I saw your integrity, the way you loved Ava despite all prejudice. And when you lost her, I knew you were the only one with enough reason to take down Gregory. He paused, a faint smile. Our meeting in the park? No coincidence. My way of reaching you. I tried to process it. Why do you trust me? I asked, my voice hoarse. Arthur looked me straight in the eye. Because you have what the Sterling family lost. Resilience. A true heart. You didn't bow to Roy and Bill's insults. You fought for Ava, and now you're fighting for your son. I see in you the fire I let die out. Then he slid a thick, worn folder across the table. My hands trembled as I opened it, my heart pounding. Classified documents. Evidence of Gregory's crimes, embezzling, shell companies, money laundering, stock manipulation. Records of suspicious accidents, sudden deaths, a journalist who vanished after investigating Sterling Group. Bribes to officials, rigged politics. A chill ran down my spine, not just at the scale of the crimes, but at the ruthlessness of the man I once called my father-in-law. Arthur explained he'd gathered these documents over years, living in hiding to avoid Gregory's pursuit. The journalists who investigated him all disappeared, he said, his voice lowering. I stayed silent because I couldn't fight him alone. But you, Darren, you have the drive I lacked. You have Tony and you have Ava's pain. I gripped the folder, feeling it burn in my hands. If I do this, I said, my voice trembling, what will I face? Arthur's gaze was unwavering. True darkness, Darren. Gregory isn't just greedy, he's a predator. He won't hesitate to destroy anyone in his way. But if you don't act, you and Tony will live under his shadow forever. Only by exposing him can your family have a future. I sat in silence, my mind reeling. I thought of Tony, the baby who lost his mother. My parents, who sacrificed everything. And Ava. Her smile. Her final promise. Protect Tony. I knew I couldn't turn back. This wasn't just justice for Ava. It was a declaration of war against a dark empire. I looked at Arthur and nodded. I'll do it, I said, my voice steadier than ever. Arthur smiled, a mix of hope and caution. Good. But remember, Darren, this will be a long battle. Once you're in, there's no turning back. We must be careful and we only have one chance. I left the cafe with the folder tucked tightly in my bag, feeling like I carried a ticking time bomb. Arthur warned me not to tell anyone, not even my parents. Gregory has eyes and ears everywhere, he whispered. One wrong word and both of us could disappear. I nodded, my heart heavy. I wasn't afraid for myself, but for Tony and for my parents. I had to be more careful than ever. Back home, I quietly hid the folder at the bottom of the wardrobe, inside an old box where Ava kept our love letters. Each time I opened it, her delicate handwriting hit me like a wave, and the pain threatened to overwhelm me. But now, that pain no longer brought me to my knees. It fueled me. Arthur and I began meeting regularly in discreet locations, a secluded park, a diner on the outskirts, an old library. He taught me how to cover my tracks, how to communicate without leaving a trace. Gregory's no fool, he said, pretending to discuss the weather on a park bench. He has an entire network. Lawyers, officials, even people in law enforcement. Act rashly, and he'll crush us before we can even speak. I absorbed every word. The documents he gave me were copies. We needed the originals, and living witnesses, people who saw Gregory's crimes firsthand. But they're scared, Darren, Arthur said. They know what happens to those who stand against him. I thought of the disappeared journalists, the suspicious accidents. A chill ran down my spine, but I refused to let fear take over. So, what do we do? I asked. Arthur leaned closer. We strike from the shadows. Step by step, we'll undermine Gregory's credibility, make shareholders doubt him, turn public opinion against him. When the time is right, we'll deliver the decisive blow, the original evidence and witnesses. But first, we have to find them and convince them to stand with us. His strategy was brutal, patient, cunning. I, a guy who'd only known honest hard work, now had to learn to move in shadows. Arthur guided me into his world of secret connections. He introduced me to allies in the dark, a former Sterling Group accountant, fired for uncovering shady transactions, now living under an assumed name, a journalist who narrowly escaped death in a car accident after investigating Gregory, now in hiding with critical documents, and others, betrayed employees, business partners, each holding a piece of the truth. Our meetings were secret, often at night. I learned to vary my routes, to check for tails. Each time I left, I kissed Tony's forehead, whispering, "I'll do this, son, for your mom." My mother noticed the tension, but only hugged me. "Be careful, Darren. I believe in you." My father was quieter, but I knew he worried. We built our plan. We couldn't sue Gregory yet, the evidence wasn't strong enough, and his network would bury any lawsuit. To take down a predator, Arthur said, "You can't miss. We have one shot, and it has to hit the heart." I looked into the darkness ahead. This was only the beginning. "We can't attack head-on," Arthur explained in an old library. "Gregory has too many allies. We have to strike from within, catch him off guard, make him expose his own weaknesses." I nodded. "So, what's the first step?" Arthur gave a sharp, cold smile. "We leak a portion of the documents. Just enough to stir unease, but not enough for him to trace it back to us. The press will be our first weapon." That night, holding Tony in my arms as he slept, I whispered, "I'll do this, Tony. I'll give you the future your mother dreamed of." Then I opened my old laptop. Arthur had provided an encrypted channel to a trusted journalist, one who'd nearly lost her life investigating Sterling Group. I selected a document, an internal report on a shell company Gregory used for money laundering, notes on suspicious transactions. No signature, no trace. When I hit send, my heart pounded. I had just fired the first shot. Days later, a small article appeared in a reputable financial newspaper. "Sterling Group. Is there something shady in their financial reports?" It didn't name Gregory, but it cited figures from my document, raising questions about the company's transparency. Reading it in my parents' kitchen, a surge of adrenaline hit me. For the first time, I felt I was no longer a victim. I was fighting back. But Sterling Group's response was swift. Gregory, flanked by his PR team, held a press conference. I watched on TV as my mom cradled Tony. Gregory, in his expensive suit, was smooth. "These allegations are baseless," he declared, his eyes cold. "Nothing but a ploy by competitors." Roy and Bill nodded like puppets behind him, but I saw the tension in their eyes. Arthur called me immediately. "You did well, Darren," he said, excited but cautious. "This is just the first stone. The ripples will spread. But don't let them trace it back to you." I nodded. "They won't find me." But deep down, I knew danger was closing in. The ripples did spread. Smaller shareholders, outside Gregory's iron grip, started asking questions. More articles appeared, digging deeper into financial irregularities. The media took notice. Arthur and I stayed hidden, watching like shadows. Each time we met, I learned more about covering my tracks. But my life was still grueling. I worked odd jobs, racing against time for Tony and my parents. Some nights, by Tony's crib, a creeping fear, I was taking on an empire. If I failed, my entire family would pay. But then I thought of Ava, her hand in mine, saying we'd overcome everything. Arthur's words, one shot. I couldn't stop. I continued leaking documents, small pieces at a time, like drops overflowing a glass. A report about a secret loan, an email revealing Gregory's bribery. Each document, a bullet fired from the shadows. I didn't know if Gregory suspected anything, but the tension was palpable. Once, passing a newsstand, I saw Roy on the front page, Sterling Group chairman's son suspected in fraud. My heart raced. I bought the paper. It didn't mention me or Arthur, but I knew we were shaking their empire. Arthur and I met in a dim diner. He looked at me, a mix of pride and worry. "You're doing well. But from now on, things get more dangerous. Gregory won't sit idly by." I clenched my hands. "I'm ready. I won't stop until they pay." As articles piled up, Sterling Group's atmosphere shifted. I no longer worked there, but old friends whispered of unease, of shareholders demanding explanations. Gregory's PR machine tried to douse the flames, but Arthur and I kept striking. We knew articles weren't enough. We needed relentless blows. I started working with a small group of journalists Arthur trusted, people who'd been threatened by the Sterlings, their hearts full of fear and determination. Anna, with her silver hair and resolute eyes, almost died in a car crash she believed Gregory orchestrated. She became our lead publisher. "I've waited for this day," she said when we met in her hidden apartment. "But Darren, once we do this, there's no turning back. Gregory will come after us." I nodded. "I know." Then, one morning, Sterling Group was plastered across every news channel. A major newspaper published a series of investigative articles, Sterling Group Scandal, Corruption and Cover-Ups at the Pinnacle of Power. It cited testimony from a former accounting employee, the one Arthur convinced to come forward, who witnessed Gregory manipulating figures. A media storm erupted. Stories bloomed like mushrooms, shell companies exposed, bribes to officials, partners pulling out of deals. Sterling Group's stock plummeted. Major shareholders held secret meetings, demanding answers. Social media exploded. Witnesses, once silent, spoke out. Another fired accountant, a betrayed business partner on TV, even the disappeared journalist, alive, recounting threats. Each story, a puzzle piece, forming a clear picture of Gregory Sterling's ruthless greed. The pressure from public opinion became immense. Major partners canceled contracts. Panicked shareholders sold off stocks. Arthur and I remained anonymous, letting the press do its work. Each time I saw Gregory's name on the news, a small piece of justice was served. But I knew we were entering the most dangerous phase. Gregory wouldn't watch his empire crumble. He would strike back. We had to be ready. News reports about Sterling Group dominated the headlines. Is this the fall of an empire? Chairman Gregory Sterling faces pressure. I watched from my parents' kitchen, knowing Gregory was hunting for me. An old friend at Sterling Group messaged me, warning that Roy and Bill were interrogating employees, hiring private investigators. Be careful, Darren. They're furious. My heart raced. I deleted the message, leaving no trace. The major shareholders, once loyal, wavered. They no longer trusted Gregory's smooth promises. An extraordinary shareholders meeting was called, this time not under Gregory's control. Arthur's ally on the board confirmed, they're losing faith. They want to act to save the company. This is our chance, Darren. We prepared for the final blow. Arthur reached out to more allies, gathering original evidence. Signed contracts, undeniable emails, even recordings from a former assistant who'd taped Gregory's secret meetings. I worked day and night, reviewing every document. On the day of the meeting, Arthur and I stayed away. We couldn't show our faces yet. We sent the original documents to Anna, who, with incredible courage, passed them to a group of major shareholders and an investigative agency. As the meeting began, the atmosphere in Sterling Group's conference room was a powder keg. I watched live through a secret link Anna provided. Gregory stood at the podium, trying to maintain composure, but I saw the tension in his eyes. Shareholders, usually compliant, now rose, confronting him. An older man, representing a major investment fund, held up a stack of documents, the very evidence we'd sent. Mr. Sterling, he boomed, how do you explain these funds? The shell companies? The bribes recorded in your own emails. The room erupted. Roy and Bill, beside their father, turned pale. Gregory tried to respond, his voice trembling, still laced with arrogance. This is slander. Fabricated. But no one believed him. Another shareholder stood and played a recording, Gregory's unmistakable voice, discussing a bribe to cover up the scandal. Silence. Only Gregory's ragged breathing through the microphone. Then, something I hadn't anticipated. A major shareholder, once a close ally of Gregory, proposed a vote of no confidence. We cannot let Sterling Group collapse because of one man's greed, he declared. I moved to remove Gregory Sterling and his two sons from the board immediately. A pause. Then a resounding aye. A rush of adrenaline. I couldn't believe what was unfolding. Gregory shouted, trying to regain control, but no one listened. The vote was swift. Gregory, Roy, and Bill were removed from the board. An interim board was formed, pledging full cooperation with investigators. Gregory and his family were now under intense scrutiny. Investigative agencies swooped in, combing through every transaction, account, email. I imagined Gregory's once untouchable face, now meeting suspicious stares. The press was relentless. Gregory, Roy, and Bill were summoned, hiring high-priced lawyers. But this time, no one could cover up the truth. Our evidence, emails, forged contracts, recordings, was too clear, too sharp. Another shareholders' meeting was scheduled, and Arthur decided it was time. This is our chance to close the past, he said. I'll tell my story, and you'll tell yours. They need to know who's behind all this. I clenched my fists. A fateful crossroads. The meeting took place in a grand Manhattan conference hall. Arthur and I arrived early, standing in a corner, observing the crowd. Gregory, Roy, and Bill were absent, barred from attending. As the meeting began, a prominent shareholder noticed Arthur. Though he'd left the company years ago, his name was legendary. Today, we are honored, the shareholder boomed, to have the presence of the man who founded Sterling Group. Please welcome Mr. Arthur Sterling. Arthur walked to the podium with measured steps, an elderly man radiating dignity. I am Arthur Sterling, he declared, and the hall fell silent. I was betrayed by my own family, pushed out of the company I built by my son, Gregory Sterling. But today, I return to tell the truth about his crimes, about the greed that tarnished Sterling Group's legacy. He recounted his story, his years in hiding, gathering evidence, waiting for justice. Then he looked at me, his eyes signaling. But I didn't do this alone. There is a young man who lost everything because of the Sterling family, yet still rose to fight. Darren Banner, please come forward. I stepped onto the podium, my heart pounding, all eyes on me. I am Darren Banner, I said, my voice trembling at first, then growing steady. I was an employee of Sterling Group, humiliated by Gregory Sterling and his sons for my humble background. I loved Ava Sterling, and she sacrificed everything to give us our son, Tony. But the Sterling family took her from me, took my job, and tried to take my son's future. I told my story, my love for Ava, their opposition, her death, the months of despair. I didn't do this out of hatred, I said, looking directly at the crowd. I did this for justice. For Ava. For my son. And for everyone the Sterling family has trampled. The hall erupted in applause. Tears streamed down my cheeks, not from sadness, but because for the first time, I felt I was no longer alone. The shareholders, once silent under Gregory's reign, now stood, voicing support. The press captured every word. Our story, Arthur's and mine, would spread far and wide. We were no longer shadows. We were victors. I knew somewhere Gregory, Roy, and Bill were watching, their faces stunned, furious, realizing the one who brought down their empire was me. Darren Banner, the penniless pauper they once mocked. Arthur's honor was restored. He was invited to rejoin the board as an honorary advisor, but he declined, looking at me with a proud smile. You're the one who should lead, Darren. You have the heart and the ability Sterling Group needs. In a surprising decision, the new board offered me a position on the leadership team. As CEO, I was stunned. I, a guy from the poor streets of the Bronx, recognized scene. After my appointment, I moved my parents to a new home. Not extravagant, but comfortable enough for them to live without worrying about medical bills or a leaky roof. Tony, my little boy, began growing up in a loving environment with better care and nourishment. My mother still told him night stories, and in those moments, my heart swelled beyond measure. Each morning, when I looked in the mirror, I no longer saw a broken man with dark circles under his eyes. Instead, I saw a father, a son, and a man who had fought relentlessly for justice. I had kept my promise to Ava, to Tony, and to myself. But more importantly, I wanted to send a message to everyone still struggling in the shadows. Hold fast to your integrity. Stay resilient. And never give up. Justice may come late, but if you keep fighting, it will surely come. So, tell me, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to fight for something against impossible odds? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to hear your thoughts.